I think it's going to be important this morning to move right in to the gospel reading itself. You know, the gospel talks about seed growth, and it treats seed growth as a mystery. The man in today's gospel reading claims he has no idea how the seed grows. Truth of the matter is, he actually does. But if you're not willing to give the person the credit who deserves the credit for allowing seed to grow, then I guess it does become a mystery. Let's take a look at a section out of today's gospel reading. The full text of the gospel is fourth chapter of Mark, verses 24 to 38, but we're going to look at verse 26 and 27. It says, "This is how it is with the kingdom of God. It is as if a man were to scatter seed on the land and would sleep and rise night and day, and through it all the seed would sprout and grows. He knows not how." The truth of the matter is, I said, this fella actually does. Does anyone know how the seed grows? Who should get the credit for the growth of a seed? Well, let's take another look at today's gospel reading, and maybe this will give us some insight. This is going to be again fourth chapter of Mark, so we're going to stay there, but this time verse 31 and 32. "The kingdom of God is like a mustard seed that when it is sown in the ground, it is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. It springs up, it becomes the largest of plants, so that the birds of the sky can dwell in its shade." In order to understand that section, we have to kind of use some visuals. So what we want to look at is what a mustard seed looks like. Let's take a look at a mustard seed. You see that little dot? Well, that's the generous dot of a mustard seed. Turns out to be that, you know how you have salt and pepper on your kitchen table? Some people like to put pepper on their food. Well, a little teeny weeny piece of pepper that lands on your French fries or something on your food, that's the size of a mustard seed. But when I work with Donna, who works our tech room, and we're trying to get together a picture for a mustard seed, I told her it's got to be a really, really small dot. We found a really small dot when we put up on the screen. I couldn't even see it. So I figured you're never going to be able to see it. So we had to use some liberty and increase the size of the mustard seed. The truth of the matter is a mustard seed is a whole lot smaller than that. It's really just the size of a little piece of pepper that lands on your food as you try to season it. And what's amazing is that little mustard seed grows in, the gospel reading says, a large branch. So I'm thinking a large branch, I'm thinking a big bush that you might have in your house. But it grows into something a lot bigger than a bush. Let's take a look at what that little seed grows into. I would not call that a bush. I would call that a tree. That's why the gospel reading on verse 32 of the fourth chapter of Mark says, "It is so big that the birds of the sky dwell in its shade." Now understand. A bird definitely is going to dwell in a shade. A bird is going to build a home inside of that tree. How does something so small grow into something so big? Who deserves the credit for that transformation? There's one person who deserves that credit. And before we get to that person's name, let's take a look at another little dot. You see that little dot? You might say to yourself, that looks like the last dot you were calling a mustard seed. Well, here's what happens. That little dot, had a sonogram been taken on the very day that we were conceived, when the egg was fertilized, everyone at church this morning, we all look like that. Had a sonogram been taken at the very moment of fertilization. We all start off as a one-cell human being in process, called a zygote. And that one cell, that fertilized egg, at the very moment it's fertilized, that one cell is there. It begins to divide and divide and divide and divide, and every division is a growth. And then that growth over a period of gestation, that becomes this, a little baby. And we all look the size of that baby at one time, and from that point forward, the good Lord gives us life, we continue to grow. It is amazing how something as small as that mustard seed grows into that massive tree. It is amazing how that one cell, zygote, turns into a human being, and that's true for everyone here. A sonogram looked exactly the same at the very moment of conception. So now we got to try to determine what's the difference maker. The man in today's gospel reading, as the parable says, he scatters seed on the ground. He goes to sleep, he rises day after day, night after night, and the seed sprouts and grows. He claims, I have no idea how. But he should have. What's the difference? What's between the mustard seed and the mustard tree? Let's take a look. God's the difference. God is what allowed that seed to become that tree. For some reason, the gospel reading, as it's trying to relay the story, there's a tendency in life not to give God credit for the credit he deserves. Just to say that the good things I have in my life, oh, I worked hard for them and I deserve them. That might be what you're saying. But everything I have, it's because of God. Are you telling everyone I have what I have because of me? Or are you saying I have what I have because of me and the gracious gifts of God? Let's take a look. What's between the zygote, the one cell, and the baby? God again. God is what allows that life to be created. As Eli is sitting back in that rocking chair with his mom, he was at one time just one little teeny weeny cell, just a little dot of life. And then he grew into a little baby boy. And he continues to grow. And that's true for all of us. We got to learn, and maybe you're good at it. And if you are, that's fabulous because you don't want to stop. But if you have a tendency not to say God and not to give God the credit, it might be something you might want to start to enact in your life. You woke up this morning, and who deserves the credit for you waking up? God. You know what happened last night? Your heart beat and got you through the night, and you never knew about it. You never knew. You continue to breathe, and breathing is an involuntary action, so you breathe all through the night. You woke up in the morning. All these things are going on in your body, and you have no control, no thought of it. You're in a deep sleep, and you could have, if you had died in that deep sleep, you wouldn't have woken up, but you wouldn't have known the difference. You see, God allowed your heart to beat. God allowed your breath to continue on. God allowed you to wake up in the morning. And sometimes we wake up, we have an ache and a pain, or we have a lot to face in the day we're looking ahead at. And sometimes we're automatically aggravated. We're automatically in a bad mood. Because we failed to realize all that went on to get me through the night, and I didn't have anything to do about it. What God did for me to get me to the morning so I can open up my eyes. The man at the very beginning on verse 27 says, I don't know how the seed grows. I think he did. For some reason, he just wasn't willing to say God. God gets all the credit. Everything we have in our life, God gets the credit. Between a mustard seed and a tree is God. Between the zygote, a first cell, human being in process, and the baby at the point of fruition, coming out of the womb of its mother, God has been the difference maker. And in our life, in my life, in your life, and everyone here, the difference maker for all of us is God. And I hope that you would ask, how did you get where you're at? I hope you include God in your answer, because that's how you got where you are at. God.